Lekker, Herman. It's lekker to have you in studio again.
Hi, Willem. Yeah, no, it's good to be here for a change again.
Right? But in a different setup.
It's a bit of a different setup, yeah. It's like the idea. Good coffee. Thank
Good.
you.
In our specially made cups
Yes,
for the
yes, no,
show, for the
of
new
course.
look. But I saw that before we started recording, you were taking a look around and upside down as if you're in a completely strange place.
You know what? Normally we out in the field. We're not sitting in a studio. So yeah, I quite like the environment here. It's quite good, but
Well,
let's
welcome.
have our discussions.
Welcome. So, okay, Herman, just the other day, you and I, um, yet again, we had another plumber that approached us with sort of both an inquiry and a concern about insurance work versus compliance. And I also know
Yes.
that currently in and among in the industry and among industry bodies, it's kind of a hot topic. So here we are.
Oh yes, very much so. I mean, there's a lot of talk. I mean, this is something that's I think the talk started a few years ago already, but it's getting more and more interesting. And the interesting thing is that more and more people start to understand it and ask the questions. So it's great to be back and to actually put the right perspective on this again.
You see, you mentioned the word questions, and I think that's the reason why you and I are having this chat, because the fact is that the plumbers have a lot of questions. You know,
Yes.
they want to know what are the do's and the don'ts when it comes to things like compliance, non-compliance, pre-existing non-compliance, because apparently there's a difference between the two, as
And
well as
yeah. Sorry, let that interrupt you there. But it's great that the plumbers are asking these questions. It shows how much effort they put into making a difference, into getting the things right,
mm,
informing. That it's part of the exciting part of the discussions and of what happens in the industry lately.
yeah. It's good to know that the plumbers are starting to think in that way. Not starting, but more and more
More and more.
plumbers are
Yes.
starting to think in that way, and actually wanting to do things in the correct
Yes.
way.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of plumbers adding to those questions that they have about compliance, non-compliance, pre-existing non-compliance, the do's and the don'ts, are also what is my responsibility? What is my responsibility? What is expected of me? What must I do? What mustn't I do? And what can I be held accountable for and what not? And where can I get a comeback and those kind of things? But before you and I get into all of those juicy details, let's quick it off quickly. Just a recap of what standards are national standards, sand standards, and why do they even exist?
Um, the short answer, just between you and me, the standards exist to cover your own backside.
Okay.
um, and to protect the consumer. That's
Mm,
the two things. Depends on where you stand. There's so many. So, what is a standard? A standard is a book. You can buy the book. It has got a list of requirements that the plumbing installation need to comply with. Let's not get into those details, but
mm,
that's what the standard is. It's a book of how to do it correctly.
mm, mm.
Um, yes, it's written into the referred in legislation and all of those things. But yeah, as I say, the standard is the set of rules, and that is what the plumber has to follow.
It's basically sort of a structure, a guideline, or a set of rules or requirements according to which a certain installation should be
Yes,
done, or according to which a product should be manufactured, or
a
those
bit.
kind of things. And at the same time, the reason we call it a standard, it's because it standardizes a thing. So it takes, let's say, for instance, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes, for instance, a geyser installation. Now, obviously, there are different types of geysers, different brands of geysers out there, or whatever. But when it comes to a geyser, and I'm not speaking of solar geysers because they've got their
Yeah,
own standard, but when it comes to normal geysers, it, the fact is that there should be a standardized way so that everybody who installs geysers do it in the same way.
I want to focus on some of the words that you've used there. So you're right with a twist,
Yeah.
and I think it's one of the important aspects that one need to understand. So You use the word guideline. Standards are guidelines. It's not a guideline. It's minimum requirements.
Uh-huh.
In other words, you have to do exactly what the standard says. You cannot deviate from that.
Mm.
If you do the minimum requirement, it's at least this needs to be done. There are further guidelines on doing even better plumbing work, on doing more advanced work and so on. But the standard is the absolute minimum that you have to comply with.
You say have
And
to,
yes.
must. It's actually a sort of a. When I read through the
Yes.
standards, I see the word shall is used.
Yes.
And that's a shall is an indication of the plumber shall do
It's
this.
not-
The
it's-
technician
yeah.
shall. It's not a question of whether you want to or not, or whether you consider doing it or not. It's a question of you shall.
You shall
do this.
you shall do that. It's not an option. It's not a recommendation. It has to be done that way. Yes, there are some of the requirements that give you the option. There are some requirements that says, well, consider the following aspects. It says you shall consider how many people are in the building, what's the size of the building, what's the water usage of the building, and then you have the following options on to decide on pipe sizing and so on and so on. So there are some of the requirements in the standard that gives you options, but by far the most requirements is shall, you have to, this is what you must do.
All right, so we've determined that what it is, but why? I mean, why do we want to work in a standardized way? Why do we want
okay,
all
now-
plumbers to do things if they have a specific installation? Why must it be done in the same way according to the same set of requirements? What is the purpose of what is the outcomes if it is done that way?
So again, now we focus on the other word, standardization. And again, I want to deviate from the word. I mean, when we say standardized, standard way, it's not about doing it the same by everybody. I mean, there's different ways one can do it
And
and still have it in accordance with the standard. It is about safety. It is all about safety. Make sure it works. Make sure it is safe. And again, our topic for a whole discussion on another day is the potential dangers of plumbing. I mean,
the risks.
do not underestimate the potential risks. It can. I mean, plumbing is fantastic. It is one of the best things for our health and safety
All right,
to bring water into the building. But there are strong risks, and the standards make sure it is done safe for the plumber, safe for the consumer.
Right. So a standard, one of the functions of it or the purposes of it is to either alleviate or to reduce risks of plumbing work being done incorrectly.
It's very big words. I'm not going to repeat them, but you're absolutely right there.
Okay, so that's
Yes.
one, right? So it's for the health and safety of the consumer, the customer, and I assume also for the plumber, because the plumbers
Yes,
are doing the work.
definitely.
They're working with these pipes. They're working with the products and the installation. They're working with hot water, those kind of things.
You can even add, especially in today's time, water security. I mean, we know that we're in a water scarce country. We know that it's getting even worse. The quality of water, all of that is actually addressed in the standards. If you do not follow the standards, the risk could be even higher for running out of water and so on.
And affecting water, hey?
Yes.
The water quality,
Yes,
the
absolutely.
availability of potable water, those kind of things. Would you also say that standards contribute to, if it's done according to the requirements of the standards, that okay, whoever compiled the standards had it in mind to say, okay, if you do it according to these requirements, then the system or the product will have optimal functionality. Could that be one of the purposes?
It could be, but again, as I said, the standard is designed for, as I said, the minimum requirements. You at least have to do. You can do better. You can do more advanced, but it remains the minimum. Optimal. It's a interesting word. I mean, if you look at optimal, what does that mean? The best possible performance that you can get. If you follow the standard, you can get to an optimal performance as well. But that's also one of the topics that, again, big topic for another discussion as well. Is how do you work from the basic requirements and upskill to get a more optimal system that you can perform? There are different things.
I hear you. So I alluded to
Yes.
whoever compiled the standards. Who is that? Who puts these things together? Who comes up with the requirements? Is it a person? Is it an institute or an organization? Is it a combination of multiple people? Who?
It's a very good question. Short version, it is us. Question is who's us? So no, very explicit. It's not a person. There's no single one person that write a standard. There's no single one person with enough influence to change a standard as well. There's no single one organization that can write a standard or change a standard. It is always us. It is always a group of people. The group, it's a legislated process. The South African Bureau of Standards is authorized or responsible for the process, for managing the process, making sure all checks and balances is in place. I can give you all the references. Go download the national norm. It explains that. That beside the point. What that describes is there has to be a group of people that represent all aspects, that represent the plumbers, that represent the engineering side of it, that represent the manufacturing side, that represent the government side, the water authorities, the municipalities that need to provide you the water and look at the drainage side, manage the sewers and all of those things. So it's, and even consumer organizations. There's a variety of people that all contribute. And understand the standard isn't written once and then it is what it is. A standard is written and then on a regular basis revised, reviewed, updated to remain in place. I think the current standards has been in place for decades and they've been revised multiple times to make sure that they remain up to date for the current environment.
Yeah. I mean, things always, we keep reiterating it in all of these conversations that we have on these podcasts and podcasts and shows, is the fact that everything keeps on evolving. Technology evolves. There's constantly going to be new types of materials, new methods of doing things that is an improvement on the previous way that something has been done in. New materials, new products, new tools, new regulation, government legislation, those kind of things that may impact the work that plumbers do. So obviously they have to be revised.
Most definitely. And I mean, it gets interesting. I mean, some of the requirements at the time when the standards were originally written, it was still very common practice to use big galvanized steel pipes for water supply, to use big concrete and clay pipes in drainage and so on. That was, I would almost say, the common practice, the most obvious items to use, which is not the case anymore. So the standard doesn't disallow that, but the standards now address all the new modern materials, the multi-layer piping systems, the newer things. And as things happen, they get reviewed and they get incorporated into the standards.
So we know what they are, why they exist, sort of who compiles them, who puts them together. But are plumbers compelled, but in any form of way, but whether it be by regulation, legislation, are there sort of laws that say plumbers must work according to applicable standards that are applicable to certain aspects of their work? Or
so interesting. It's you probably didn't even know it, but that's a loaded question. So no, okay. So let's get to the short answer first. Yes, it is a legal requirement for all plumbing work to comply with SANS 10252 Part 1, which is the parent standard for water installation, SANS 10252 Part 2 for drainage. It's a legal requirement. They have to comply with that. And for geyser, SANS 10254. Okay. How is it a legal requirement? Through different sets of legislation, but simply put, there's call it the Water Services Regulations that were published in 2001, made a specific requirement that says all plumbing installations shall, there's the word, all plumbing installations shall comply with those standards. The question of whether it's been enforced, who police that, is a different question. Unfortunately, there's no national system to enforce to make sure that it complies. That does not take away the legal responsibility of a plumber to make sure that it is there. So the law is there. No matter who the plumber is, whether they are registered with the PRB or not, it is simply put, it's illegal for them to deviate from the standard
Mm.
in any way.
That's quite interesting to know because I don't think that there are many plumbers out there who actually know that. I mean, often when you chat to plumbers, and I don't want to call names, but I've chatted to plumbers, and then they really they might not have been registered with the PRB by the time that I had the conversations with them. They they really didn't even know about the standards. It was they had their qualification, they had their plumbing training, but they didn't know the requirements of standards. They didn't even know which standards are applicable to plumbing work. And
It is it really is unfortunate that that is the case, and we know it. We know that that happened. At the same time, we can talk about all the multitudes of plumbers that do know and they do follow it more and more. And the more we engage, the more they follow and update themselves on the requirements of the standards. But it is unfortunately a fact, which just makes the work that the PRB do so much more important. I
yes.
mean, the same way that the plumbers don't do that. How many consumers you think knows about this?
Oh,
I mean, the
but I would almost say 80 to 90% of consumers don't know that
all
that
the
that
all the all the all the consumer knows is I need the work to be done and it needs to be right.
I think the most important question that consumers would ask themselves is this guy, is this woman qualified for this
Yes.
tradesperson? Are they qualified to do what they are doing? Am I going to get a scrappy job, or am I going to get a decent job done by somebody who's at least qualified to do what they are
Yes.
supposed to do? But they don't really know, and that's why I always tell my family and friends, since I got involved in the plumbing industry, is that you really have no idea how how complex and intricate plumbing work
Yes.
really is, truly is. But the fact is, PRB registered plumbers, they in they self-certify. They issue a COC, a certificate of compliance,
Correct.
for for the work that they do. Um, to self-certify that the work that they have done, whatever part of the installation or the system that they've worked on, whether it's a replacement or an installation, a new installation or a repair or whatever the case may be, they self-certify with COCs that my work, the work that I've done, does comply with the requirements of the applicable standard,
Yes.
right? So they know, we know that they want to work according to the standards, whether they have to or not, but they have got that in them. And we spoke about it, we alluded to it earlier in the conversation, that more and more plumbers are becoming have that awareness and that desire
Yes.
to work according to the standards and do things correctly, right? So, but now they get, for instance, and let's call it by its name. Let's say they get called out for insurance jobs, and they arrive on site, and they know that when they leave, that installation that they are supposed to do is supposed to be compliant.
Yes.
They know that to the best of their ability, they are going to do it compliant. They're going to do a compliant installation, use compliant products, or whatever the case may be. But now they arrive, and either there are pre-existing non-compliances that that they pick up, and they see, okay, but these things, if I do not fix them to make them compliant, then whatever installation I do, however hard I try my best to make my work compliant, these pre-existing non-compliances is going to it's going to have a negative
Yes.
impact on my work. It's actually going to make my work non-compliant. And then there's the question of, do those aspects that are non-compliant, the pre-existing non-compliance, does it fall within, or do they fall in the scope of work that the plumber has to do? And is the insurance going to cover it? Is the customer going to cover it if the insurance is not going to cover it? So here's this plumber who's now between a rock and a hard place. What happens here? What is required of plumbers to do regarding pre-existing non-compliances?
So just to align with our discussion, let me not answer you directly, and again come from it at it from a different angle. So exactly the same situation that you're now referring to. Now let's look at it from the consumer's point of view. I'm the consumer. All I know is I had hot water. Something went wrong. I don't have. This needs to be fixed. Phone the insurance. Plumber arrives. Now what? So understand the same as we said. The consumers don't know what they don't even know their standards.
Mm.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't. All they know is I need an expert to come and fix this. The poor consumer don't know what might have been wrong. So you've mentioned now there was pre-existing. It means something in the current installation that is there at the moment is wrong.
Mm.
Um, just a quick side note. Remember when we talk about things that is wrong, within plumbing, there's different levels of safety that works in. You should be very lucky that most of the time those levels of safety isn't used because it's there to protect when something goes wrong.
Yes.
So the argument that people often use and say, well, I've been using this thing for 10 years and it's never been a problem. You're lucky that it hasn't been a problem because you don't know. You're lucky that a dangerous situation did not arise, which would have required the safety features to work and that the safety features weren't necessary. So just using the argument, it used to work, it should be fine like that. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It can still be dangerous. So with that being said, consumer don't know that. Consumer thinks everything was fine.
Yeah.
How can something that is all that this plumber needs to do is come put another geyser and go off? So yes, this does put the plumber in a difficult situation, but it puts the consumer also in a difficult situation because now, and it comes back to information. If you trace the various legislation, I mean, Consumer Protection Act is actually an act that just plainly enforce good behavior, common sense. I'd say, just be honest. It comes down to communicating, making sure that people can make informed decisions. The plumber's got the responsibility to inform the homeowner and to inform the insurance company so that both the homeowner and the insurance company can make informed decisions over what happens next. So the situation you explained. The plumber arrive on site, he see all of this non-conformances, which can definitely be an issue. His responsibility is report this to the homeowner, report this to the insurance company. It's actually between the insurance company and the owner to debate who's going to pay for what.
If they want to pay for it.
If they want to pay for it, there's trade-offs in all cases. If the consumer, if the insurance company is not legally obliged to pay for upgrades. In some cases, the insurance companies may not pay for improvements. They may pay for fixes, not betterment. Betterment is the word that is often used. So insurance company doesn't have to pay for betterments. The insurance company can, however, hold the owner responsible to make sure that his installation is correct. And remember, the installation belongs to the homeowner. The homeowner is the one that ultimately are responsible, that takes the final responsibility. So the homeowner can decide to say, no, I don't want you to fix that. But the homeowner is the one that takes the risk. Part of the risk that it takes is it might risk the safety of his family. It might risk his future insurance with the insurance company because the insurance company can turn around and say, you didn't want a compliant installation, therefore we cannot lawfully insure you anymore or for that item. It's all possibilities. There's a lot that can happen. Our discussion now is about the plumber. So it comes down to the fact that the plumber needs to inform. When the plumber get the instruction back.
We say need to, but can we use that word must?
Shall.
Shall.
Actually, yes. He shall inform.
He shall inform.
Yeah, so while you bring it up, he shall inform. It's one of the standards. In SANS 10254 for geyser installations specifically, it is an explicit requirement. The plumber shall inform the owner of any non-compliance, and he shall inform him in writing of any pre-existing non-compliances. So that's his responsibility, apart from the fact that it's just good practice and it's the right thing to do. it is a legal requirement for the plumber to inform the consumer and by reference the insurance company.
Right. So the responsibility of the plumber, and he or she is actually obliged
Yes.
to notify in writing the
Yes.
consumer, the customer, of pre-existing. So by the
Yeah.
time that the plumber arrives on site and he does a quick inspection to see, they do a quick inspection to see whatever the circumstances
Yeah.
are, picks up a couple of things within that system that are non-compliant according to the requirements of the applicable standard,
Yeah.
makes notes of it, issues that to both insurance and customer, depending on, as long as at the end of the day the homeowner knows
Yeah,
about it.
if we're being practical about that, the standard says that the owner of the property should at least be informed. By reference, it makes it if the insurance company, remember it's the insurance company that appoints the plumber. So therefore, it's obviously your responsibility to inform the insurance company as well of whatever this non-compliance is in writing.
All right. That's pre-existing stuff
Yes.
by the time that the plumber arrives on site.
Correct.
So now the plumber is busy doing the installation or their repair or whatever the case may be. Now the plumber knows that the standard, the applicable standard, requires this, and this. Let's say, for example, we'll use the example of R1 lagging. Right? Now the customer and the insurance both say, we're not going to pay for that because R1 lagging is more expensive than the other types of lagging that you get. But as a plumber, for a fact that the standard requires that. And the standard says, you as the plumber shall install R1 lagging for this specific installation. Now, the plumber knows that by the time that they turn around and walk away from site, something that they have done or installed, if the insurance refuses to pay for it or the customer refuses to pay for it, and obviously it cannot be expected of the plumber to pay for it out of their pocket.
No.
It's not I don't think that's fair.
Yes.
Right? What happens in that case? Because let's say, for instance, the plumber who came to discuss with us said that the insurance was querying and questioning and didn't want to pay for new brackets that they installed.
Yes.
Whereas the previous brackets for the geyser that he was replacing was non-compliant, number one, and secondly, not compatible with the new geyser that he was installing. So he had to put in new brackets. But the insurance company went as far as saying, why did you use new brackets? There were brackets in the wall. I mean, it sounds nitty-gritty, it sounds petty, but these are the things that plumbers actually face. I'm not sure if it's on a daily basis. I'm not sure if it's all plumbers who do insurance work, but that's not the first time that I've heard a plumber say that they've had those kind of queries. And what now? What happens? Because they know that they must install, make the installation compliant, but in the situation where neither insurance or customer wants to pay for whatever is going to make it compliant.
Yes. So I think the different ways of looking at this. The one thing I want to add in there, we keep using the insurance as a example here, but it's not only insurance companies, and we're not trying to vilify the people out there and saying, oh no, this is such a negative situation. I think that's why we come back to information. It's something that people simply wasn't aware of. The information becomes, and the more that people become and organizations become aware of it, same with body corporates for complexes, developers, and so on across the board. The more they become aware, the more they ask the questions. And then the more the topic comes up and says, who is responsible for this bracket? Who is supposed to pay for this bracket? We are aware of insurance companies that actually pay for that, go the extra mile and say, this is included in our thing. We are aware of insurance where it's the other way around, where they say, no, this is the homeowner's responsibility. And it depends on which topic you take. Is it the bracket? Is it the lagging? Is it, we can debate that a lot. it almost becomes a commercial decision.
Mm.
And the PRB don't interfere in that.
Mm.
That is for the commercial environment to sort out. And we're not dictating who is responsible, who should do what, whatever.
Mm.
What we can confirm is the plumber is responsible to inform. And then when he gets the instruction, he implements what he was instructed to do.
Mm.
So in a case where he informed everybody that the brackets are bad, I need to place others, use other brackets, his client instruct him, do not do that, then the plumber is right not to do that.
Mm.
But this is where it becomes very important. Understand that if there's complications afterwards, if there's going to be an audit, if there's any future claims, if there's any damage, anything goes wrong, there will be inquiry. People will ask the questions. If there's no evidence that this was your instruction, the plumber might be on the wrong side, and he might have to answer for things that he was instructed to do wrong.
Exactly.
So we strongly encourage plumbers to keep records. Make sure that you have records of the instructions that's been given to us. If it's a verbal instruction, it's just an example. But if it's a verbal instruction, follow it up with a WhatsApp, with the email. Keep records of that. If you have written instructions, make sure that you've got records of this. Make sure that you have records of informing and records of the instruction that you've been getting. So if something goes wrong, if there's inquiries, anything, you can always go back to the records and say, I was right to do it this way because I did inform you, you did give me the instruction, and there's the evidence to prove it.
I think I'm so happy that you actually mentioned keep evidence, keep record, and keep a track record of all communications, so that if by the time, because the plumber knows that by issuing a COC, self-certification, they open themselves up to being audited. And when they audit it, the auditor finds that something is non-compliant, a product that was used, or something like that, material that was used that's not non-compliant, or whatever aspect is non-compliant, who will be held accountable for that? It's going to be the plumber. That plumber runs the risk of having to take accountability for that. And if you cannot then provide sufficient evidence or records of where you, by either the customer or the insurance, was given that specific instruction and said, nope, we refuse, we will not pay for R1 lagging, then at least you know that you are covered. You have informed them. I want to quickly go back to where you say inform and sharing information, and how vitally important that is. Because when you and I spoke to the plumber who came to see us with their concern and the inquiry that they had, you shared with them a valuable piece of advice of how they can sort of sell the benefit of the proper product, the compliant product, the R1 lagging, and how you explained about the heat loss. Most of the heat loss in a geyser system goes through that copper piping, because it's the most conducive, the conductive material. And when the water flows through it, most of the heat gets lost through that. And if the heat gets lost constantly, and it has to heat itself up more and more regularly, and that the thermostat has to switch on and off more regularly because of the heat lost through the pipes, that in turn increases the customer's electricity bill. It's a higher expense for the customer. And if you take the initiative to educate your customer, and the insurance for that matter, about why the R1 lagging, then for that matter, is the requirement, because it is the proper or the most efficient lagging to put on to prevent that from happening.
Simple. None of us who likes load shedding, we don't like load shedding. So please start fitting R1 lagging so we can get rid of load shedding. It's a big contributor. It's a simple argument. So I think the important thing of what you say, we can debate this R1 lagging a lot, and we can use lots of examples on how to communicate. But the challenge comes in, how do you communicate? What information do you give? It's one thing to tell the consumer, listen, the standard says I must. I don't know why, but the standard says I must. You give some information. If you can add do that. Use this example. If you can add to the consumer, say, man, you know how much energy you lost, you know how much electricity you pay for that. So come here, touch the geyser. Is it warm? Yes or no? Okay. Touch the pipe. Ooh, feel how hot this pipe is. Heat loss is from a hot object to the atmosphere.
Mm.
There's a very hot object. If you put lagging on that, imagine how much electricity you save. It's just an example of how to communicate and how to try to get the message across. I know it's easy for us to say.
Yes.
And it's often a lot more difficult to communicate that to the homeowner, to the insurance, and all of that. But that is one of the things that plumbers can do to um, make a difference, make a positive difference, and make sure your customers have a better appreciation of what it is you're telling them.
Mm.
Try to understand the reason why, not only the fact that the standard says so.
Yeah.
And that's it. Well, it's coming full circle. There's a reason for every single requirement. There are no requirements in the standard that's just there because we used to do it that way. There's no requirements that's there just so that we can all do it the same.
Yeah.
It's not about standardizing the work. If I overindulge on that one terminology now, but it's not about the standardization. It's because every single requirement has got a purpose, a reason. If you don't understand the purpose now, don't undermine it.
Mm.
Don't
Well,
ignore it.
we
Rather contact us. And I say from the PRB side, if there's anything in the standard that you don't understand why, contact us, ask us. We'd be happy to help you understand so that you can communicate that better to your customer as well.
And I did say to our listeners and our viewers, our audience, that we're going to have quite a few of these podcasts where we're going to actually unpack some of the requirements of the standards. Where we're going to actually tell them why does this requirement say this? Why this? Why that? Because understanding the reason behind it makes it easier for you to explain and educate your customers at the end of the day. And like you said, none of us like load shedding. All right, let's round this off, Herman. We've been chatting for quite a while, so
Yeah.
we don't want
My
to
coffee is getting cold now, but it's fine.
We don't want to bore the audience. Let's just recap quickly. What are the responsibilities? What is expected of the plumber when they issue a COC when it comes to how they should handle and notify whoever they are doing the work for of stuff that was non-compliant by the time that they arrived on site, pre-existing non-compliances, as well as instances where, you know, whoever they're doing the work for, whether it's insurance or the customer, simply don't want to, you know, they don't want to take the financial cost of having the more expensive but the compliant products or materials or whatever installed, or having something fixed to make it compliant.
Yes.
What are the expectations of plumbers in those two instances? Just to recap, and what can plumbers actually be held accountable for?
That could be a long answer. So let's not repeat everything that we've said so far. To just I'm going to focus on the part of about what can a plumber be held accountable for, because that sort of it addresses a lot of what you've actually mentioned now. So the plumber is accountable, can be held accountable for implementing, for complying with the standard. That's simple. So even the plumbing standards are technical standards that give you certain steps to do. The Consumer Protection Act also holds a plumber accountable, but as an expert. The consumer is not the expert. So in the Consumer Protection Act, it requires a plumber to give that extra advice, the necessary information that the consumer need in order to make an informed decision. That's what it's about. So if you fail to inform the consumer or the insurance company, or if you fail to inform your client appropriately, you can be held accountable for that. If you follow the instruction of the consumer to do an installation with non-compliant material, they cannot hold you accountable for that. Then that accountability passes on to the person that gave you the instruction.
Mm.
Except if you can't prove that that's the case.
Mm.
We can delve into, and I'm not a legal expert, so let me not try to unpack the laws. Say the important part is it is the information, the evidence is very, very, very important. If you have to, at the end of the day, go by hearsay, oh no, but he told me, you are likely to end in the wrong side. You are likely to be held accountable for something that somebody might have instructed you to do. So that's the key. You maybe if we say you can be held accountable for what's in writing, that what the evidence is for, that is it. So yes, you have to be able to show that you informed them of non-compliance. You have to be able to show that you did not create non-compliance by your own will.
Mm. Mm.
Now, don't decide, this is easy, I'm just going to do it that way.
Exactly.
You will definitely be accountable for that.
Mm.
But if you informed, you've got the instruction, you cannot be held accountable for that if you have evidence to prove it. Sorry, I know I repeat that quite a lot. I don't want to be too boring with that, but it is so important. It's easy to do the right thing, but if you can't show you've done the right thing, you might still find yourself on the wrong side.
Just to chuck a spanner into the works, but then we can close it off with this question quickly. There's always that factor of there can be instructions from your customer, whoever you're doing the work for, that for a fact is against the law. You may not, there's a law that prevents you from doing this thing. You may not do this. Finish and klar. You may not. You can get arrested for it, or whatever the case may be, or I don't say arrested. Let's not go there. But the fact is, legally, you can get penalized for doing it. But now the customer insists. Before you leave the site, you will do that. You will do it. You obviously have to consider the risk of taking that accountability and breaking the law, breaking a legal thing that says you are not allowed to do this or not allowed to do that.
You're starting to ask very difficult questions, but that is what the plumbers face.
Yeah.
Some more than others. I think it becomes a difficult judgment call to make for plumbers sometimes, but there is a level of judgment that you will have to apply. Yes, the law says this is how it is. Yes, the law holds the owner of the property accountable if it is eventually done incorrectly. But it does get to a point where if you know it's a dangerous installation, for instance, if you know there's a risk. Let me use an example. We've seen installations where some of the roof trusses, they struggle to get the geyser in. So in collaboration with the consumer, whatever, they cut the roof trusses to make space to fit the geyser.
And they compromise.
I mean, something like that is a serious health and safety risk. It can cause the roof to collapse. It can cause fatalities for something. Yes, you can potentially walk away and say, well, I was instructed to do so. But that's where, as you say, the risk can become a bit high. You may find yourself in court where the judge may say, really? I can see you've been instructed, but really you didn't see that that's going to kill somebody in the process? It's not a clear-cut case that you will be able to walk away scot-free from that. You might be able, you might be held accountable for something like that. So always make sure that you, again, properly regard, but apply logic. Yeah. Apply the logic to that sense. Be cautious of that.
And good judgment.
I've had discussions from plumbers that says it's difficult, but they sometimes walk away from a job.
Yeah.
They can't walk away from the job because of the pipe fittings or dispute on pipe fittings. But sometimes dangerous applications, dangerous things, they simply say,
yeah,
it's too much. I'm not going to risk it. In the greater scheme of things, I'd much rather walk away. And not only because I might be compromised, But because I don't want to create a situation that's going to compromise the consumer who I try to inform, but they don't understand. They still don't understand,
Or they don't care.
or they don't care. Well, the only way, the only way you don't care about plumbing is if you don't understand. Because if you do understand the potential dangers, you will care.
Listen, Herman, I think that this specific, like I said, when we started off this conversation, I said, it's a hot topic in the industry currently, and there's much to be said about it. And this conversation of ours can continue for hours at end. But I think that we've said quite a mouthful, and I think that we've shared quite valuable information with our plumbers. So thanks for having hopped in. Thank you for having taken the time off. For sure. We'll continue sort of in this line, and take it to a different, slight different approach in our next conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, I'd like to extend the invitation from the PRB. If there's any plumber or consumer out there that has got a query, a question about the why in the standard, let's not debate whether it should or should not be. But if you're not sure about the why, contact us. Let's try and help you understand.
I want to end it off by saying how lekker it was, and how lekker it still is to see more and more plumbers asking questions and saying, but wait a minute, this thing says I must do it like this, but the customer says I must do it like that because they don't want to pay for this or the insurance. And it shows that plumbers are becoming more aware of the standards. It shows that plumbers are taking more responsibility and pride in their job, and that they have that drive and that urge to do things the right way.
Oh yes, no, I fully agree. And what makes it exciting is this is not isolated cases. It happens more and more. There are loads of plumbers. There are lots of people coming with questions and commenting on that. So this is exciting.
Lekker. We're going to chat again, Herman. Awesome.
Enjoy. Thanks, Willem.